Fola, our wonderful producer, her brother is a oyster farmer in South Kerry. So I got to, the summer that the world kind of shut down, 2020, I had signed on to do it and was at a loose end and was keen to oyster farm or learn how to do. Oh, I wasn't keen necessarily to do that. I was keen to learn that skill. So I went down and kind of spent a week with John Michael, her brother, and he taught me how to do that, which is really eye-opening in terms of how labor intensive it actually is. It's not for the faint-hearted, and besides that, like learning how your workday doesn't necessarily finish at a certain hour, it finishes with the tide, which I think is illustrated in the film as well.
And then which can very quickly endanger your life.
Yeah. And they really don't know how to swim, which is baffling. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Erbland. I'm the executive editor of IndieWire, but no one is here to see me. You are here to see the stars of God's Creatures, Emily Watson and Paul Mescal.
Hi.
So we're going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll throw it to you guys for questions. So think of some stuff to ask that I forget to ask. So I have a little bit of a cheat. I interviewed Emily this morning, and we talked a lot about Paul. So can you share with us what your first meeting was like, which was not in person? It was obviously over Zoom. And I don't know, just what that was like.
Was it over Zoom?
It was.
Yeah. I remember the walking around in the field. That was my first real encounter with you, I feel like.
No, we had we were in isolation, all in separate cottages along the coast of Donegal. And we rehearsing on Zoom, which was so incredibly frustrating. Mm-hmm. So that when we actually met in person, it was like being sprung from prison, and we kind of bounced around the room. It was very exciting.
Yeah. I also remember getting to like walk around, like asking producers to let me go to Emily's like cottage, and we got to walk around and look at like little lambs being born and talk about the film, which was a nice introduction, I think.
It was.
Yeah.
So this film, obviously, it doesn't work if the bond between you two isn't believable. So how did you make it believable from the first moment we see you guys together on screen?
Not difficult, I don't think.
Not difficult.
To know him is to love him, and we just had a very stimulating process. We were both very interested in the psychology of the film and the many undercurrents of it, and we just talked a lot and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think Emily is a phenomenal leader, not just of like cast and actors, but of like film. I think we looked to her for guidance and leadership and all of those things, but I think you wear it, and like you wear it so lightly, and kind of carried us through what was dark material. And one thing that really surprised me about Emily, or about you're right there, was kind of how you relish in kind of the fun of it. And that was equally important to you as the kind of joy of their relationship, as much as the kind of traumatic second half of the film.
Well, what's the point if you're not having fun?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the rehearsal process where you felt as if you had been sprung out of prison? You told me you guys were running around like an abandoned hotel.
Yeah, we were. We got into the room and we all sat down, and Anna and Celia are very thoughtful, very quiet, very serious, and I just said, we can't do this, and we had to get up. We got up, we got a ball, and we started throwing a ball around, and then it was only after that I realised that this is a Gaelic football star. But and then we played hide and seek in the hotel. It was completely abandoned because of COVID, and we just ran around and hid, and we played like children for quite a long time, didn't we, before we actually started approaching the work. But we just felt we needed to get out of breath and be in our bodies, and because this film is so much about being not in your head but animal somehow.
Yeah, it was that, and I think I was just waiting and watching how you approached it, because I don't think I was confident enough to be like, this is how I work. So again, it was just one of those moments where Emily's instinct is always right, not only in like the finished product of like the film, but in the small details of rehearsal. Like, you knew what, not just what you needed or I needed, but also what I think Anna and Celia, what we collectively needed in those moments, which I appreciate.
You had a lot of physical challenges in terms of the work that your characters are doing. Can you talk about learning how to gut a fish and go fishing?
Yeah, Fola, our wonderful producer, her brother is a oyster farmer in South Kerry. So I got to, the summer that the world kind of shut down, 2020, I had signed on to do it and was at a loose end and was keen to oyster farm or learn how to do. I wasn't keen necessarily to do that. I was keen to learn that skill. So I went down and kind of spent a week with John Michael, her brother, and he taught me how to do that, which is really eye-opening in terms of how labor intensive it actually is. It's not for the faint-hearted, and besides that, like learning how your work day doesn't necessarily finish at a certain hour, it finishes with the tide, which I think is illustrated in the film as well.
And then which can very quickly endanger your life.
Yeah. And they really don't know how to swim, which is baffling. Yeah.
Emily, can you talk about the fish gutting that you've learned? You told me
Yes,
some.
I can butter salmon, which is really quite gross, and I can fillet mackerel at speed with a sharp knife. But all the SAs were local fisher people. They worked in fish processing plants, and because we had a COVID bubble, they were all the same people, and I mean, that was a real part of the authenticity of the piece, and which really you could, as soon as you picked up the script, you could smell it. Shane Crowley and Fola are from that place, and when you read it, you could tell these people really are from something very profoundly connected to the sea, and which was a wonderful journey, particularly for me. I'm from London, and it was like a very, very alien and foreign place to get to at the beginning.
So you filmed on location. This would not work without that. Can you talk about that experience and the village where you filmed?
Yeah, it was like a mixture of both, like the perfect place to film in terms of like the isolation that COVID provided, in terms of we were just in a bubble the whole time, but also the landscape is brutal and hard. And I said earlier in the interview, I don't think it really tolerates a kind of softness or headiness. I think it requires a kind of physicality to survive, and I think it looks beautiful on screen, so it is serving multiple purposes, but I think it informs the work in kind of like below the surface ways that I don't really know how.
I found it very magical and hypnotic, and made that sense of needing to feel animal was very informed by being there. Yeah.
You worked with a pair of directors. What's the process like as a performer working with two brains that are having to come together for one thing?
Really, two brains that were pretty indivisible, I have to say. They are both very, very smart, very quiet, very, very thoughtful women, and they had thought very long and hard about every moment. And so when we were on set and we had a long rehearsal process, really diving in deeply into the emotional resonance of everything in the film, but when we were on set, they had a very clear idea of what was needed. And so when we did a take, they would one would go to camera, one would go to the actors. There would occasionally be a little sort of at the monitor, and then they would give notes and you wouldn't know it. It was never the same one. You wouldn't know really who, if you were having a conversation with a different person. It felt seamless, and I've really felt they let us. They really gave us the story. They let the actors do heavy lifting, which isn't always the case. They trusted us, and which is a great experience.
Paul, was your experience the same?
Totally. It was that thing of the thing that baffled me was sometimes they wouldn't confer after a take, but they have such wonderful trust in each other that, and I think that's down to the preparation they do. I think they prepare intensely so that they are working towards a kind of common goal, and with that comes this kind of really affronting understanding of the film but coming from, as Emily said, like two different people, but two brains in this instance I think are better than one. Yeah.
When you're thinking back to production, was there one day that felt particularly challenging, physically, emotionally?
On the water, for sure. When we finished, I said to Shane, never write a movie that's a plot point depends on the rising tide. I mean, it really was incredibly challenging to, obviously we had to reach and protect a very kind of high octane emotional denouement, but we were, it's a stunt. We're in the water and the water was too cold to be in safely. We were in waders, which if you get water in your waders, you drown. There was a lot going on. And we really had to look after each other. It was challenging, but it was funny as well. We laughed a lot, I seem to remember.
Just hysterical when they call cut finally. One of the scenes that sticks out to me is the scene in the bar when I come in with Emma and you confront me on that, and then Dad comes along, but there's kind of a level of violence to that scene which is indicative of, I think, what the O'Hara household was kind of in what precedes the film, and that's an uncomfortable place to be in, obviously. But I'm excluding the kind of actual physical act of it, it's like that act of violence throughout the day kind of seeps in a way that is uncomfortable, and that day felt particularly long, I think.
Do you guys have questions? I bet you do. Ooh, right here.
I have a question for Paul. Do you see your character as sympathetic at all?
Me personally? Yeah, I think it's my job to sympathize with him in the working towards it in the film. I think I have my own opinions about who he is as a person outside of that, but I think my job as an actor is to approach him with love and respect and let the audience judge it after. And I think it's my job to find out why he acts the way he does. And I think you can only do that through some degree of sympathy or desire to sympathize, I think.
Oh, this gentleman right here.
Because it seems such an active choice on the entire cast to smoke. And so, no, but you're talking about it being animal and physical. And so I was curious, was that part of the animal physical thing, or was it just simply you showed up at the village and everybody smokes?
The latter, I think. I think it is. No, I think it's just true. I think it's like with Shane and Fola grew up around that. And one of the things I remember John Michael Fola's brother doing was he would smoke roll-up cigarettes without the filter, and I asked him why, and it was because you don't have time. Like, you don't have time for the fiddly bits, like to get the filter, and it's about the act of smoking. So I think it's actually to do with the accurate representation of that particular community, I think.
Right here.
Was any part of it improvised, and was it difficult to learn the dialect?
It was. No, not really improvised. It was a very beautifully, fully formed script when we got it. In terms of the dialect, obviously, I think for the Irish actors it was easier, but it is notoriously a difficult thing to pin down. And I had a dialect coach, and to me that's always a big part of what I do, just because I think my voice is quite ugly. I'm sort of nasal and heady in English, and I wanted to get a long way away from that. But also it's getting away from a place where the character is making considered judgments, because she's a very instinctive person. She's, she sort of bypasses a moral framework because because of that. So finding the voice of it's very important.
Okay, I see way back up here. There. Yes. Yes, you.
Both these great performances. I'm wondering if the film came together in the way that you envisioned when you first wrote the script.
We were talking about that earlier. It's like, I think in spirit, absolutely. And then there's that thing of like, you miss, or I miss the performance side of things that you give and lose. But that is true, I think, of every single film. But I think the spirit and the tone of the script that I read and fell in love with is totally true and the same. Yeah.
I think we shot a lot of material that, you know, that it was too long, and there are things that have gone, which, you know, obviously you miss, but absolutely it does feel very like the script that we read, yeah. And and just in terms of the way that they have put it together, it doesn't lead you, it doesn't tell you what to think or explain everything. You know, there's a lot of things in the family that are implied and left unsaid, and I love that about it, with the restraint, and that you're kind of asking questions rather than being told answers.
Right here.
Actually, this builds off that last comment, because so much of the interactions between the characters, there was a lot of silence. It was very, people took their time in responding. People didn't always respond immediately. Did you all as actors find that dynamic very naturally, or were you directed to sort of take your time, don't respond yet, or was that written in the script? How did you come to that dynamic?
I don't remember. I feel like it is. I don't remember being directed to kind of take space. They weren't the kind of notes that Anne and Silly would work from. I think it was, they would always note from a kind of deep internal place. Like if something wasn't landing for them, it wouldn't be in terms of timings or like beats. It would be how best to describe it. Like they'd be more internalized notes, and that became a shorthand the further we got into it. But I think those pauses or the space that you're feeling is probably innately how we all engaged with the script and the tone ourselves, potentially.
I think it's a community that becomes very toxic because people don't speak, because they don't have emotional fluency. They don't, you know, I think, you know, one of the very important things and first things that we discussed is that Aileen and Brian would never have had a conversation about consent. It's just not, even in the room, it's not being raised as a good Catholic. You know, we go to Mass, we do blessing of the boats, we sing all the songs, we do the thing, but we don't actually have that moral responsibility of our own. And I think that's, you know, those silences and the way that it's written, people sort of hint at things. Like I ask him, you know, how was Australia? But I don't want to push the point, because I know that if I really ask him what happened, what went on, it might explode. The whole, you know, what feels to me like a very, very happy return, and my life has I've come back to life, I might lose if I prod too much.
This lady right here, the blue.
Yes, thank you. I felt it's interesting. I'm hearing what you're saying, but I wondered if the situation had happened to your daughter and not your son. You see, I saw the bond with the mother's son so deeply, and that you were protecting him and you favored him. Mm. Would you have been in the same silence and non-speaking if it was your daughter?
I think the scene that I have with her, once the Aileen has been sort of pushed to the place where she realizes what she's done, and at the funeral when he's spat at by Sarah, there's an animal reaction which is not in his defense but in her defense, and that, you know, the needle has really gone by that point, so she cannot She can no longer pretend to be the person who thinks she knows and loves her son. Then her daughter says, she says that it's like the whole world's turned upside down, and her daughter says, no, it's always been like this. You're the only one. You're just seeing it for the first time. And that to me is a moment where Aileen really sees her daughter and goes, oh my God, it hangs in the air that she herself has been through something like this. She's experienced something, we don't know, it's only hinted at, but it's like a peeling back of, she's seen everything wrong. She's idolized her son and given him everything and missed what's been right in front of her eyes.
Oh, right here.
Paul, how did you drown in the sea?
Did you guys all hear that? He asked how he drowned.
Yeah. The drowning was miserable. It was basically, I wasn't out of my depth essentially, so there was a lot of kind of like walking up, the imaginary stairs acting when you're like going down. That was kind of my process with that scene. But it was that, and there's kind of the build up when you're walking across and you're building into this kind of crescendo, and then you just kind of drop into the sea and pretend to drown. But I think we did it 2 or 3 times, but there's kind of I like doing scenes like that because there's a kind of innate thrill to doing something physical, and I think it does a lot of the work for you if you just commit and jump in head first, literally. And
it was dangerously cold as well.
It was dangerously cold. So Anna and Celia were kind in terms of just like trying to roll as much as they could, even though we were shooting on film, but just getting up and repeating it and doing it again. But there's something cathartic about calling out for your mother and having that kind of, in a film that is quiet and subdued for a lot of it, to have a kind of calling out to the gods. Your mother is, I think, a good way to go out.
Okay, we've got time for one more. This lady caught my eye.
Going on about that final boat scene, which was so powerful, I guess this would be for you. How did you find that moment when you're lying and you're looking up at the seagulls and you just decide to kind of let them go? Like, as an actor, how did you find that?
We had a lot of conversations about that, and because when I first read the script, that was my question: how does that happen? And it's really it's sort of bookended in the film. In the funeral scene at the very beginning, I'm cradling the baby and I'm singing to it, and it's a silent prayer to please to God to bring my son home. And I put the baby back in the pram and I look up and he's standing there. And it's like everything flows from there, because this is blessed. It's divine intervention. I have magic I'm magic. I have made this happen. And then at the very end, when I want him gone and I don't know how to deal with what I've done, I'm lying there in the boat and he's calling for me, and I go, over to you, God. I'm not going to decide his fate. It's in God's hands, which is, instinctively, I don't think it's, she's rationally thinking it through, but she can't take responsibility for herself in that moment. She can't take responsibility for what's happening. And then it's done and he's gone. And that's an instinctive moment that is then, in her understanding of how things are, delivers him into purgatory and her into perpetual torment, which I still find very sad. It is very sad. Yeah.
Well, Emily and Paul, thank you so much. And thank you all so much for such wonderful questions.
Thanks for coming.